Blaming the victim of sexual assault is a defense mechanism that society uses in order to distance themselves from the situation. If I can label the victim as being different from me, I can reduce my risk of feeling vulnerable. People tell themselves all the time, I would never place myself in a situation that would allow me to be sexually assaulted. Therefore, it could never happen to me. This is a false sense of security because every 2 minutes, someone is sexually assaulted. A survey conducted by the Haven, a rape crisis center, suggests that society will often blame victims of sexual assault when it is believed that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time or if they were wearing a certain type of clothing. In my presentation, I will show how society tends to blame victims for being in a place where some people believe the victim had no place being, or when these same people believe the victim was wearing clothing that was deemed too provocative. In Arizona, a former police officer drove intoxicated to a concert. Once inside, he came up behind the victim, put his hand underneath her skirt, and ran his fingers across her genitals. The former officer was arrested and the case went to trial. The presiding Superior Court judge lectured the victim, stating, "If you wouldn't have been there that night, none of this would have happened to you." The former officer was convicted of sexual abuse and sentenced to 4 days in jail. When people in positions of authority blame the victim for being violated, it sets a standard saying it is okay to shift the blame from the attacker to the victim. My visual aid is a table utilizing the results from the 2010 survey consisting of more than 1,000 men and women. The Haven, a rape crisis center in London, administered the online survey entitled Wake Up to Rape. The table shows how the survey suggests that some people believe in certain cases victims should take more responsibility for being sexually assaulted. Over 70% of women respondents believe that the victim was to blame if she or he got into bed with the attacker prior to the attack taking place. 57% of the men agreed that the victim was partially to blame for going home with the attacker. When the respondents were asked if they would report a rape, less than 15% said they would. 55% said that they would be too embarrassed to report it. Embarrassment was the leading reason, followed by those who would want to pretend that it never happened, which came in second with 41%. My next point will explore how victims are being blamed for being sexually assaulted when their choice of clothing is believed to be too provocative. The Jakarta Post reports that victims are blamed for sexual assaults by one of the highest ranking officials in the city. He urges women to avoid wearing clothing that will arouse men and passengers while utilizing public transportation. Once again, the statements of people in positions of authority suggest that the victims should be blamed for being sexually assaulted. This time is wearing the wrong type of clothing. In Cleveland, Texas, 14 adults and 6 juvenile males raped an 11-year-old girl on 5 separate occasions over a 3-month period. The news broke when one of the students reported to the teacher that he had been shown a video of the crime taking place. The video filmed by one of the attackers. During the trial, the residents of the town blamed the victim for wearing makeup and clothing that made her look 21. The entire community turned on the victim. In conclusion, research suggests that society will often blame victims of sexual assault when it's believed that the victim was in the wrong place at the wrong time or they were wearing a certain type of clothing. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. We do not deserve to be sexually assaulted and then blamed for an act that we played no part in. Instead of telling victims, if you hadn't been there that night, this wouldn't have happened to you, or don't wear those clothes, they will cause men to be aroused, let's remind people not to rape. Let's place the blame where it belongs, with the attacker.
Why do people blame the victim?
People blame the victim because they want to make themselves feel less vulnerable, and they do this by separating themselves from the situation.
How can I help in stopping the cycle of victim blaming?
Don't allow others to blame victims in your presence. Assure the victim that they did nothing wrong, and never accept excuses from an abuser or their actions toward a victim.